And, your face has probably been created, but not by yourself. So how can you own copyright on it?
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Beneath the Law. You know, I was thinking about this episode on the way in here on my very long, lengthy, traffic-laden drive into work. I do drive. I apologize, and I admit it. But, what is the law about? One of the things that the law often governs, and one thing we see in law everywhere around the world, is law really governs who owns what and what can be owned. That is really a fundamental concept of law. What is property and what is title to property? Those are kind of ethereal concepts that have really gone in flux in the last little while. And one of the other things that I was thinking about was, law and regulation always lag so far behind innovation and progress. It takes a while, frankly, for the regulators to get caught up with the marketplace, to get caught up with what's really going on. And the pace of change in our modern world has just accelerated exponentially and continues to accelerate to the point where regulators, frankly, are left in the dust, even if they can find the dust, as things change. And one of the real issues that is arising now, I think, is AI and the advent of AI and who owns what and what is property. And when we think about things, like, what would be a property? Well, I think about, look, this is my voice and this is my face. I assume fundamentally that they're mine, but are they? Are they some? If I own them, can I sell them? Can I rent them? Just like I own my house, I could rent my house. If I own my face, why can't I rent my face? So, Stephen, we have a guest today that I think can cross all of these bridges. And most importantly, perhaps, is that AI and ownership and title, we're not just talking about, my country or my province anymore. This is global. And who's going to govern that? And where are the laws going to be, first of all, made? Where are they going to be applied? How are they going to be applied? How's it going to be enforced? Stephen, maybe you could introduce, I think, one of the leading experts worldwide on this issue who's been kind enough to join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. We're welcoming as our guest today Alfredo Esposito, who is a lawyer based in Italy. And I came across Alfredo when we were looking at this very interesting issue of, do you own your face? Do you own your voice? And so Alfredo is a global lawyer. He specializes in intellectual property, has over a decade experience in legal tech and intellectual property and digital rights. And he is certainly been writing a lot lately on generative AI. He also practices, I guess, some criminal laws, is my understanding. But I guess maybe shifting more over into generative AI and the issues around, can you copyright your face? And that's what Keira Knightley basically came out with months ago with an announcement that that's what she wanted to do. So welcome, Alfredo.
Hi, Stephen. Gavin, thank you for having me today. And it's really a pleasure to be here from my hometown, Naples, in Italy, up to Canada. So that's wonderful. That's global as our topic, as you were saying before.
So what I want to ask, what is happening in the European context in terms of this whole idea about generative AI? Keira, obviously, she lives in England, is my understanding. And what impact did the announcement that she made have in the European context?
That has been really, really weird for every one of us. Let someone talk about copyrighting your face. No one usually think about copyrighting this face because copyright, it involves creation. And, your face has probably been created, but not by yourself. So how can you own copyright on it? So that was tricky. But I think that's because, let's say in Italy as well, and in some country, European country, the right to one's image usually is in the copyright code. So that's why, that wasn't absolutely absurd. That I think that was a nice idea just to have a better discuss about this topic. You can't copyright your face, but you can preserve your identity. So I think that, Nirunatli said something technically not 100% right, but she caught the point because, of course, we have a problem that can be sorted out through copyright laws. The one that we have in Italy, the one that we have in Europe, and I guess the one that we have global in USA and in Canada as well. That's something bigger going on.
So in the European context, if I understand what you've just said, is there then a layering of copyright law in terms of each country would have its own copyright law and European would have a second copyright law? How does it work there in the European context?
It does work. Usually we have a global law, European law, let's say, that not each country, usually, that's depending on the matter, each country can incorporate in its own regulations. So you can say that 95% of laws across Europe are kind of similar between each other. So when you talk about these big topic, big issues, so, the one that are globally intended, you can say that Europe has got one law. Also, if there is a slightly different regulation in the country, that's the same as the GDPR. That's the regulation about privacy, and each country has its own law that basically is taking the European law and making in your own country simply. So what happens that usually, as well for the voice, also about cloning voice, you don't have the right about your voice. And I was just reading recently that probably the only state that has got copyright on voice is Vatican City, because the Pope once, he was basically talking and someone had the idea of remixing his own voice, the Pope voice. I don't remember, I don't think it was Francis II, but the story is quite known. So basically, someone made a song just taking the voice from the Pope, and they decided, say, we can't allow this. So they asked to one really famous Italian lawmaker to do something stricter about copywriting of the voice, and that's what they did. So right now you can find that, in Vatican laws, Vatican City laws, a rule that's stricter than any other country in Europe, and that's the one that is forbidding to use the voice and the lyrics and text, of what's written by the Pope. But that's something that's really specific because they have their idea. But usually you can't relate on protection of voice or your face just looking at the copyright. That's something much more serious. That involves your identity. That involves your personality. So you can look at the, let's say, previous century scheme related to, you can look at the previous century scheme related to the copyright, but I don't think that's the right answer. That's why I think now we have to go beneath the copyright law. As in USA, now we are still talking about hybrid copyright. Before Gavin was saying, you own or you don't own, we don't know. That what happens that now if you want to register something, a copyright on something you created, you are you can't if this is been made through an AI, a generative AI model, because that means that your the percentage of your job is not enough to make that creation able to be filed and to be registered. But if you have a story and you are, I don't know, creating images, so the images are not yours, but if you're creating a story, I don't know, creating a comic book, you can have a copyright on the comic book, on the story, but you can't have it on the AI-generated images. So now we are having a hybrid copyright. That's something completely new. And So that's where the discussion starts, and then it goes further and further, and we could talk about all the developments.
Well, interestingly, I mean, I think when you're talking about that, but the two different types of remedies is the copyright remedy where you own the work or the creation. And actually, when you were talking about that, I was thinking to myself, you say, well, the face is not created. And I was thinking, has there ever been, for example, plastic surgeons who have sought to copyright a face that was the product of their creation?
I don't know if there is something like this, but that could be theoretically possible. Don't give strange idea to people with idea, but I think that could be possible.
So, yeah. It's absolutely. But then the other thing that was interesting was in the remedy in Canada, and there is such a tort, there is what's called appropriation of personality, which is to say someone is sort of going to your Pope story. It's they're stealing the identity of the Pope for the commercial purpose of their song, obviously, because nobody's really interested in it if they sang it. It's much more interesting if the Pope sang it. So that is certainly a tort here. But going back to some fundamental propositions, I can't appropriate something from you that you don't own. So if I talk about the appropriation of your personality, there has to be an acknowledgement or a recognition in the law that your personality is yours. Therefore, if it's yours, someone else can appropriate it. I can't appropriate from you something which doesn't belong to you. So is there not a recognition in the law that there is this fundamental ownership in oneself?
Not really. That's why there is this kind of discussion, because usually the purpose of what you do and what do you do with my image is really important. That could be matter of criminal law, because you're using it for frauding someone. So probably that law that will be applied is going to be a bit stricter than the copyright, usually the copyright law. Or you can do it because you are making fun of someone, and so in this case, I don't know. You are making a parody, and this also by copyright law, there is an exemption for having sarcastic videos on someone. So that's why you always have to take this idea. That's true. We have, no one can appropriate our personality, but still we got the fair use exemption, or, other application of the law that could be higher in grade and maybe, I don't know, being felony or misdemeanor related to each criminal code country. Now what we are having, that's kind of weird, because we are experiencing in Europe a lot of new content on dubbing and dubbing translation, and also on movies. And of course, if you can take the voice of someone and you can put the face of someone, that's depending just on the purpose you want to use it.
Alfredo, let me ask you this in a commercial context, because I think this is where this is going with the technology of generative AI and the ability, frankly, to animate an image of someone for purposes. So let's say I took the image of, I don't know, anyone, the Pope, or a voice of, let's say, someone quite famous for their voice. Morgan Freeman, for example, has got that voice we hear all the time on all sorts of documentaries, etc. Fantastic voice. And I take a sample of Morgan Freeman's voice and I decide I'm going to use it for my radio commercial. Or I take a picture of the Pope and I decide I'm going to animate him through AI to be the pitchman for my commercial to sell my product. Would those individuals not have a remedy against someone seeking to commercialize their image or identity?
Yes, absolutely they do. There is this experience. I think recently it was Tom Hanks. He has been manipulated, I can say, for a dental clinic ADV advertisement. So, of course, that's one of example of Scarlett Johansson. I think it was with Lisa AI, generative AI model. So the remedies is, of course, you have to see what they are reaching. I can talk about our law. It can go on breaking copyright license, because it could be possible that the frame they're using, it's from somewhere. So if it's from somewhere, let's say it's from a movie, you are breaching several copyright laws. If it's just your personal picture that's, you just took because, you made the picture together, that's a bit more tricky. But of course, you are using someone image, and that can, break several laws. That can go from unfair competition if it's a competitor, and this happened in Italy because someone was using another image of another competitor, or that could be under the big umbrella of copyright law. But that's the thing. That's kind of weird that you're still using the right to image law for discussing about this. This is not kind of breaking license on someone. That's just what we are doing now, because of course, if we have to settle or we have to, litigate with someone, we have to have a law codes where to image our trial, our case. But the thing is that right now, there are several things that goes around. This kind of trial, they don't go further because right now, there is still uncertainty. That's why now you can have this big, incredible trial, between Stability AI and artists. Because right now, still, they can see and they can't understand if there is someone that is breaching copyright or not. Now, if you are using someone else's picture, so you are giving a prompt using someone else's picture, of course you are breaching the copyright. So the outcome, it will be based on copyright breach. But if you are creating something from zero, let's say because you are asking on Midjourney or Ideogram or DALL-E or Stable Diffusion to create someone that looks like that person, that's different because right now the last order of North California court say that there is no evidence that that's a copy, but maybe that's just a training on someone else's picture. So that's why it's really, really tricky. There's still, we can say that's a copyright breach, and everyone can say that looking at Midjourney output, there is some copyright that has been issued. But right now, we can't honestly give a certain answer in this. That's why we are running. That's why I'm writing a lot, because this is changing, and also looking at the last executive order by Biden in USA, and also the code of conduct that we had between G7 countries. Now the generative AI, everyone is looking at generative AI to avoid fake news, to avoid something that could be worse for the entire society. But there's just slightly talking about copyright, just slightly talking about artists' rights, because right now they don't know how the model works. And if they don't know how it works, they can't file a proper... So, I don't know if this is clear. It's a bit confusing, I don't know, but I usually give more questions than answers. That's one of my roles.
Well, I think that's the real issue, that there are a lot more questions right now than answers. And I think you touched upon it in terms of, if I create a face myself that just happens to look like somebody's face, then, am I actually appropriating that person's face? And then we have the whole issue of deep fakes, used, Tom Hanks's image used to promote oral hygiene products or some form of dental plan. You mentioned Scarlett Johansson being used. But there are fraudsters who actually are using the images of celebrities, basically getting funds. And we had an issue as well where someone famous here in Ontario, his name was being used for a product, for a fraud. We ran into a lot of difficulty trying to get the fraud removed from the internet, trying to get the police involved to look at it. And so my question really comes to, would regulation or creating a statute or including something in the statute not be better than the common law? Would that be better, really, than the common law to have this from a legislative perspective rather than leaving it to courts? Because there are certain places where going to court won't actually lead to a remedy.
That's another great question. I'm a great patient about common law remedies, because sometimes we can see that there is, our legislation and our lawmakers, they take too much time sometimes, to create something that could be useful. And sometimes the time you use to create something, when you are done, the future is already here. And so you have to change it again. And that's something that is tricky. So that's why in Europe now the regulations authority, they are working probably a bit better, because we have, of course, our European acts but they are just guiding and they give principles. But right now what's working a lot, they are the national authorities that say this could be done, can be done. So let's say the authorities of privacy in Italy, they stopped ChatGPT from being used because they were breaching something, or there was the risk of breaching something. So there was no statute regulation involved, and there was no non-common law remedies. So it's something that that's an authority that is just looking at something that's changing, and because we don't have the right answer, and probably the answer is coming and the answer will be evolving in the next few months, it's better overlooking and, having some guiding principle all over the world that could be as well useful for ruling decision in your courts, because that's a thing. We need principles. I don't think that statutes right now, will be definitive. There is something that it's too global. And because it's too global, you need something faster. You need to answer rapidly. And probably, national European regulation, as in Italy, they are taking maybe a bit of, time, too much time.
Yeah, and I think two things that sort of leap out to me on some of those comments. Number one is I hear you on the source of the use of the image, for example, whether you took it from a copyrighted image or you took the picture yourself. But I think that is such an artificial distinction that gets, and frankly, that's rather superficial to what I think is the core value and issue. When we live in an age where personality and personal brands are of such great value and are monetized so often everywhere we go through social media, through other things, it seems to me that there must be a core recognition of the ownership of oneself, be it personality or image, that goes and transcends, frankly, where you got the picture from. That's number one. Number two is the conversation that you just had is really the point, and our experience trying to deal with the monoliths of Google or what have you, is what do you do about it? Having individual jurisdictions like Italy or Ontario or Canada or the United States, or even for that matter, make regulation. First of all, you're right, they're always 6 months behind and 2 days late. And number two is, so what? Because it's who is policing the internet? Who is policing the ability of those images to be used for commercial purposes or otherwise? And who's going to stop it? I mean, you could get an injunction somewhere, I suppose, but what do you do with that?
Not so much right now, because that's why we need a global answer. I can, someone can just break in our conversation now, take my video and make an avatar and sell it in Taiwan, and I can't do anything about it, and everyone knows. So that's the thing. Right now, we know that globally we have a huge trouble, a new problem in enforcing the law, and also having the rights respected globally. So that's why we need principles, and that's why we need the guides, because otherwise, if we put something on internet, maybe we are protected in our country, maybe we're protecting the country, and we have alliance with, but the rest of the world, they can still make, I don't know, fake porno or something, and spread it everywhere. That's one of the risks. So that's why we need to educate. That's why we need to give probably an answer that have to transcend a bit from our intellectual property classical view. That's what I think. because we still think about copyright as something from the past centuries. As you were saying before, it's kind of artificial, and there's really slight difference between how I take the pictures or how the pictures I have the pictures. This is something we shouldn't talk about. We have to talk about human rights, and that's one of the things. Is really now it's a right that we have to defend for ourselves, and that's the right to identity. It's the right to one's image. It's right to misappropriation or any other law figure that we can think about. But that's human right, and I don't think this has been understood completely. But I think if I that's not the time. But I can imagine a trial case. I will probably look at this as a human right, because you are using my personality, you are using my face, and that's something that goes further than copyright.
So let's talk. So in the Canadian context, our Charter of Rights protects what's called the security of the person, and that's that I don't know. Do you think you could define that broadly to say that the person, by definition, is not just my physical being? Well, it is but it's also everything about my personality, everything about my individuality, my personhood, and I have a right to security, a constitutional right in Canada, a charter right to that. Do you think that is the way potentially that this law could move?
That could be a good way, of course, with all the integration that the technology needs. Because I was trying to also to think about our constitutional father, who was able to look at this kind of manipulation that we are looking at now. 1 year ago, we were just starting using ChatGPT, someone of us, and that was crazy. Now it looks so old. The first version of Midjourney looks so old, and so all these things. So I think that's something specific that needs to be integrated about the use of our face. And of course, that could be a good start, but that's something that we still don't know what will be. But it's not kind of law or kind of the idea, that's a bit more of philosophy that, we had the habit right now. I think that goes beyond, and it will involve as well the rights of our expression and our face. If you just think about police enforcement, how this kind of technology could be used to recognize you moving in your, law firm department or in commercial mall or in the street. That's a great question. It's already there, but
it's there. I mean,
you can do it.
I walked. I was laughing. I'd talk about the old guy in technology, but I was in New York City recently, and I walked up to the customs gate, and I was standing there, and I'm like, "Wow, how does this thing work?" And the next thing is the customs officer was Gavin. Hey, Gavin. They knew everything about me. They go, "You're through. Don't worry about it." Through facial recognition, they knew who I was. They had my whole record in front of me. They were calling me through the gate and started saying, "Okay, boomer, you don't have to keep playing with the machine there." So it's already there. I mean, that's already in play. I'm sure that is the potential for that kind of recognition that transcends other issues too, not just commercialization and contract and real property or intellectual property issues, but privacy issues, huge privacy issues with respect to that.
That's not a good point. That's a privacy issue. If you're walking, to a mall and there you see this kind of huge mirror that are integrating AI, so they can show you, yourself with new clothes, and you're just walking, and they're showing you, with your new clothes. How can I be protected to don't receive this massive advertisement? There is, that's another issue. Now that's privacy issue because you are manipulating my data, but as well you are doing some actions that are, not really commercially wise. We could sell. So there are plenty of things that we will, of trouble. So legal trouble that we will dig into in the next months.
Well, I don't know anything about it, but I can tell you that I know that that's happening already because, for example, you'll be having a conversation with someone. I don't know. You talk about canoes. And the next thing is you'll open your smartphone, look at Instagram, and there's an ad for a canoe. It's just so if anyone who thinks that that's coincidences, I think be very naive.
But I think that's an interesting point in terms of the discussion on privacy, because that is another, I guess, potential avenue to protect a person's rights. So, we've now talked about copyright, we've talked about the Charter, we've talked about human rights, but there are also privacy laws that I suppose could work to protect somebody's image. And we had that, I think, in a case here in Canada where a woman was photographed on the steps in Quebec and then sued because somebody used her image from that photograph that she gave no permission for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably one of the merging point. We have to look at all these regulations, the privacy as well. That's really important as the copyright. The thing that the problem with privacy regulation, let's say in EU, that it's not really enforceable, not always enforceable. That's the thing. Yes, someone could be so silly to use a picture of someone commercially, using a picture of someone for profit purpose, and of course you can sue the guy, but it's really, really hard if your picture is just spreading on internet, enforcing the privacy.
So that I absolutely agree with you, because law frankly is irrelevant unless there's some enforcement, unless there's some ability to apply the law and frankly make people's and curb behavior or control behavior. So what is the remedy? I mean, as we were talking about this, I mean, there's the web, there's the dark web. There's completely unregulated world online, where there's all sorts of nasty and nefarious things going on, apparently. But so who's the police force that needs to be around to enforce this, and where do they come from? Is it an international convention, and who's going to do it?
That's that's another question that doesn't have a real answer. As my experience as criminal lawyer, I can tell that mostly of the criminal complaints we filed about fraud identity on internet or anything, they simply say, okay, we can't prosecute, we don't have the technology to prosecute them, so we are sorry. So that's one of the things I always say to everyone. Just it's possible that you will, if you have your own investigation force, as we sometimes we do, and you do your own research, and so you have to put a lot of efforts, you are able to see, where a frauds or when took place. But as citizen, I can say that that's really, really hard. That we have to see, do we want to give a bit or more of freedom? Let's say just having a Chinese style police enforcement in which we could be able, and 100% they will know if privacy, if someone is stealing something, or we want to still have a bit of freedom in using all this technology. And, the answer is in the middle, and honestly, that's not a perfect balance. I don't think there is a perfect balance still.
Do you have any views, Alfredo, on Biden's executive order? I mean, my read of the executive order, I'm not an intellectual property lawyer, but I thought while it might have been a step in the right direction, really doesn't address the issues in a very fulsome way.
I wrote about the executive order recently, so I had a chance to studying a bit more. And what really caught my attention is that he was written a bit on European style, let's say. So they were probably not addressing 100% the whole problems that all the artificial intelligence could have, but they were giving principles. One, and I really appreciated it, it was about we have to use it for our major global troubles that are climate changes and health. So that's something that honestly, for coming from US was kind of weird. And they were starting saying we need to have authority internal to study the phenomenon. So that's something that really, really looks like a European act. So we are not going deeply into all the issues because probably we can't right now because that's just one executive order on plenty of matters. But I think they are starting to addressing properly. Honestly, I think it was really a good start. And as well, also, when you read about US thinking and talking to having a global activity, and so not just something in which they have to prevail, I think that's a good direction. Usually, you could have a country that says we are the best, we want to be the best, and whatever, we will breach any kind of principle to reach our idea and our profit idea. Instead, they were like, okay, that's kind of dangerous. So let's do this together. From our point of view, possibly we would like to address this in climate change and health issues, and of course also, on other topics. But I think that was a good start. Then we have to see how the principle will translate into the regulation. That's, of course, something we will have to see. But I think that was really a good start. Looking at 1 year ago, looking at also the fragmentation that we had in US, until now, we can say, and California that already had another regulation, I think that was a really good start. Globally looking, I mean.
Well, it's clearly a global issue and not one that's going to be solved by any individual country. And I mean, it truly is, when we talk about the internet, it's truly beyond the ability of any one country, or in fact, any group of countries to regulate, because you would have to pretty much police everywhere, in order to, everywhere that I suppose with a wire and a power outlet, you'd have to have some sort of control over. So it's a remarkable. We're living in a remarkable age, and as I think I said at the beginning, I mean, regulators are always chasing reality and trying to regulate change as change happens. They're always late, and as change has picked up speed, exponentially, the regulators seem to be slowing down. So we're left with a bit of a Wild West type situation. Kind of troubling, but we throw our little 2 bits into the World Wide Web with our podcast, with Beneath the Law. Listen, Alfredo, thank you so much for joining us with your insights. It's really been eye-opening and thought-provoking, and something that I think that if there are any regulators out there, need to start thinking about, how do we police and how do we manage the world that will, not the world we live in today, but the world that we will live in 2030 and beyond. Pretty interesting question. So once again, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Beneath the Law. It's been a real treat to have Alfredo Esposito here. Please check out his writings online. Very interesting material for sure. And Stephen, thank you again for joining me. And to all of you, please join us again on the next episode of Beneath the Law. Give us a rating if you are so disposed, and please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So thanks for joining us once again, and always remember, if no one is above the law, then everyone is beneath it.